Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. My ex-husband, James, 43 male, was my parents' dream son-in-law. A commercial airline pilot with a magnetic charm. He could talk his way out of anything. My father idolized him, constantly talking about how James had such a stable career and how lucky I was to have a husband who made great money and could provide me with a good life. My mother? She was practically smitten. She called him the son she never had and would always take his side in any minor disagreement between us. I won't lie, James was charming, and for a while, I thought I had hit the jackpot. We had been married for 8 years, and I thought we were happy. We had our ups and downs, but what marriage doesn't? But one day, I came home early from a business trip and walked straight into my worst nightmare. James was in our bedroom, tangled up with none other than my best friend, Rachel, 39 female. The woman who had been my rock since college, the woman I confided in, the woman I trusted with everything, was in my bed with my husband. I remember standing there, feeling like the floor had been ripped out from underneath me. James had the audacity to look shocked and even had the nerve to say, "This isn't what it looks like." Rachel? She just covered herself with the sheets, eyes wide with guilt. I was numb. I grabbed my things and left, shaking with rage and heartbreak. I spent the night at a hotel trying to process what had just happened. I barely slept, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? How could they do this to me? How could I be so blind? The next day, I went straight to my parents' house, seeking comfort and support. Instead, I was met with judgment. "He's a man," my father said. "Men make mistakes." "He still loves you," my mother added. "Don't throw your marriage away over one mistake. You're 40, and it's not going to be easy to find a good husband." I was stunned. This wasn't just a random hookup or a drunken mistake. James had been having an affair with Rachel for months. He admitted it when I confronted him later. But my parents didn't care. In their eyes, he was still their golden son-in-law, and I was just being dramatic. When I told them I was filing for divorce, they were furious. Not at James, but at me. My father went on a tirade about how I was ruining my life over something so small. My mother cried about how this would humiliate our family. The final blow came when I tried to stay with them for a few days while I figured out my next steps. My father crossed his arms and said, "I think it's best if you work things out with James." That's when I realized they weren't going to help me. They had chosen him. I had no choice but to stay with a coworker until I could find an apartment. My own parents had turned their backs on me. It was the darkest moment of my life. I had to start over with nothing. No home, no support system, and no marriage. Meanwhile, James and Rachel carried on like nothing had happened. After my divorce, I went no contact with my parents. I didn't see the point. They had made it clear where their loyalties lay. They still invited James to family events, still spoke about him as if he were their child. Meanwhile, I was left there alone without support, betrayed by my two closest people, and no support from my parents. But I focused on my career, worked my way up, and eventually met the love of my life, Daniel, 44 male, the Minister of Finance in our country. This is important later. A few weeks ago, news of our engagement broke. Suddenly, my phone was flooded with messages from my parents. After 5 years of radio silence, they were now desperate to reconnect. "My darling, we're so happy for you," my mother gushed in a voicemail. "We would love to meet Daniel. Let's have dinner." My father even sent me an email saying how proud he was of me and how he would love to walk me down the aisle. I ignored them at first, but then my mother showed up at my office, all smiles and warmth like nothing had happened. "We miss you," she said. "We made mistakes, but family is family. Don't let the past keep us apart." Oh, now family matters. Where was that sentiment when I was homeless and crying on a coworker's couch? Where was it when they chose my cheating ex over their own daughter? I told her, in no uncertain terms, that she and my father were not welcome in my life. They had made their choice 5 years ago, and I had moved on without them. She sobbed, saying I was being cruel, that I was punishing them. I stood my ground. Now relatives are reaching out, saying I should forgive them because they're still my parents, and everyone makes mistakes. Even James, of all people, had the nerve to text me, saying he was happy for me and hoped I would find it in my heart to let go of the past. I told them all the same thing. My parents made their bed, and now they can lie in it. Am I the a-hole? I feel no guilt about cutting them off, but a part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. Should I give them a chance? Or am I right to keep the door closed for good? OP's parents chose OP's cheating ex over OP. They had 5 years to make things right, and they didn't. Now that OP is engaged to someone successful, they suddenly miss her? Yeah, no. They don't miss OP. They miss the status they think they'll get by being associated with the Minister of Finance. I guarantee if OP was marrying an average guy, they wouldn't care. They only want back in because it benefits them. OP needs to block them and enjoy her new life without these selfish, toxic people. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Oh, the audacity! When you were at your lowest, crying for help, they shut the door in your face. But now that you're engaged to a powerful man, they suddenly remember they have a daughter? Nope. Actions have consequences. Don't let them manipulate you with the family is family nonsense. If they wanted to be family, they should have acted like it when you needed them. Keep the trash out. Your parents are textbook opportunists. They threw you away like garbage, but rolled out the red carpet for James. You were struggling, and they didn't even offer you a couch to sleep on. But now they want front row seats to your wedding? Hell no. This isn't about love or family. It's about power and status. If you let them back in, they'll treat you like garbage the second they think it benefits them. You're not punishing them. You're enforcing the consequences of their actions. They made their bed. Now they can rot in it. If you do decide to let them in, make it crystal clear that any slight disrespect or attempt to bring up James will result in immediate no contact again. But honestly, I wouldn't even give them that chance. Your life is so much better without them. I have a daughter, Elena, 6, and my stepsister Jess has a daughter, Hattie, 5. Me, my husband, Jess and her husband Paul are all staying at our parents' house over the Christmas period. For context, Paul arrived a day after the rest of us, very late at night because he does shift work and worked late before driving to our parents. The next morning, the girls were playing in Elena's room at about 10 a.m. The adults were all downstairs, except Paul because he was sleeping, and my stepdad was out. Suddenly, we heard Paul shouting. This is not too unusual, if unpleasant, but this episode sounded particularly bad, so we got up. Before we can even get to the stairs, my daughter runs down crying, saying Paul had shouted at her for waking him up. My husband was livid and went upstairs to deal with Paul while I calmed my daughter down. I knew it would be absolutely impossible for us to be around Paul after what happened, so he would probably be leaving. Jess said that was ridiculous. Paul probably got annoyed and was tired, and he'd apologize, and everything would be fine. I said no, it would not be fine. Nobody shouts at my child and remains on speaking terms with me or around my daughter. Paul should know better than to be acting like that with other people's children. When my stepdad came back, we told him what happened and that we would be leaving because we refused to subject Elena to being around Paul after what he did, and we don't trust him not to overstep his boundaries like that again. My stepdad agreed, but said it was unfair we should have to leave after Paul was the problem. He called Paul and Jess down and said they had to go. Paul tried to defend himself, saying the kid should have been quieter, but when my husband got annoyed, Paul half-heartedly apologized. I didn't believe a word of his apology. My stepdad reiterated that Jess was welcome to stay without Paul, but Paul had to be gone within the hour. Jess started crying and said it was unfair and that my stepdad was choosing me over her and was a horrible father. She started an expletive rant, so I left the room with Elena, and the next I saw was her and Paul going upstairs to pack. They left without a goodbye. Since they've been gone, every few hours I've got a text from Jess saying how I've ruined her Christmas and her relationship with her dad over 30 seconds of bad judgment. I don't think I created this situation because it was my stepdad's decision to throw them out. I offered to leave. I also think Paul made his bed that Jess is lying in. All he had to do was come downstairs and ask us to quiet the children, or pop his head into the room and ask politely. Nevertheless, I do feel bad that Jess is stuck in the middle and that Hattie won't see her grandparents on Christmas because of this. Did I overreact? Would Paul apologizing have been enough? Everyone sucks here. Paul is an a-hole for shouting rather than using his words like an adult. You're an a-hole for immediately going nuclear and dramatically announcing you're leaving without so much as a discussion. Your stepdad is an a-hole for not even trying to mediate and jumping straight to kicking your stepsister's family out. You all need to learn to communicate more effectively. Not the a-hole. A 5-year-old and a 6-year-old are going to make noise playing together. It was 10 a.m., not 1 a.m., so I fail to see why anyone should have gotten angry about it. I'm stuck on the part where you say Paul shouting is unpleasant, but not unusual. That's an issue. If your brother-in-law is shouting at his kids enough for it to be a normal thing, there's something wrong there. She's 5. Her dad shouting at her shouldn't be the norm. Good for you for standing up for your kid and your family. Paul has absolutely no business shouting at your daughter for playing. She's 6. Honestly, I'd say that short of causing bodily harm to his daughter, he should never be yelling at someone else's kid. You didn't demand that they get kicked out. You told your family that as a result of your brother-in-law's inappropriate behavior, you would leave, so your daughter wasn't subjected to it anymore. Your stepdad obviously agrees that Paul was out of line. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked you to stay and Paul to leave. I have a feeling this shouting thing happens often. Otherwise, I don't see why your stepdad would have asked Paul to leave. Everyone sucks here. Yes, Paul shouldn't have yelled, but you, the adults downstairs, should have made sure that the children aren't too loud and wake Paul. Going all nuclear and dramatic isn't fair in my opinion. He made a bad call, but I bet he was tired and cranky. I, 24 female, am a starving law student who had to save up forever to get my laptop that costs about $1,000. My sister, 18 female, is a single mother of a 2.5-year-old son, so I appreciate she has it hard, but I am not made of money either. I came home for Mother's Day weekend. Sister and nephew live at home. My sister wanted to borrow my laptop. I told her sure, as I was going out to the bakery to pick up a Mother's Day cake. When I got back, my sister looked real sheepish, and I asked what happened. My mother pulled me aside and told me to please not be mad, because my sister is terrified, but she basically left my laptop and her toddler unsupervised to go and get some food from the kitchen, but also left coffee right by my laptop. So her toddler spilt the coffee all over my laptop, and now it's ruined. Like I said, I am not made of money. I don't like to use my credit cards unless it's an emergency, but I needed my laptop as I'm going to be taking summer classes. I told my mom that I will insist my sister pay me back for the laptop, plus the interest I'm going to have to pay since I will need to put it on my credit card, and if she does not, I will take her to small claims court. My mom was begging me not to because she's a single mom, and I don't understand how hard it is to be a single parent. I told her they don't understand what it's like to be a starving law student putting yourself through school. I told my mother that she can buy me a new laptop of equal value, and I will not go to court. My mother says she can't afford it either, because all her money is basically going to this baby, as my sister just has a part-time minimum wage job and will be starting community college in the fall. I said she is an adult now and has to suffer the consequences of her behavior. This should not come out of my pocket when I was kind enough to loan her my laptop. And she should not have left the computer, nor the toddler, nor the coffee unsupervised. She said I can always go to the library while saving up for a new laptop. But I have to work, and the library is only open at certain hours. To not interfere with my job and my classes, I would have to get up at the crack of dawn to go to the library. They have cut back on their hours due to short staffing from the virus. So I will have no choice but to put this on my credit card, but I can only afford to make minimum payments. I hate doing this because I wanted to avoid having to pay interest or having high utilization rate on my credit card, $1,500 limit, which will lower my credit score. So I want to take her to small claims court to pay for the laptop and the interest I'm going to have to pay. Would I be the a-hole? Not the a-hole. However, you need to check a few things. Do you or your mother have renters or homeowners insurance? If so, you may be able to put in a claim for it. You should also check your purchase agreement from when you bought the laptop. It's possible that if you got an extended service plan that covers accidental damage, you might be able to fix it under warranty. I figure you would already know if that's the case, but sometimes things slip by you. Not the a-hole. Your sister was careless and owes you for the damages. I suggest you go to Geek Squad or something. They may be able to salvage it. A lot of credit cards come with damage protection warranties, so you may be able to get some money back that way. If you originally paid for it using a major credit card within the past 12 months, some will cover 2 years. Look up the card's website and see if you qualify. If all you have to pay is a deductible, it'd be much easier to get your sister to pay for that. Not the a-hole. Hell no. She is an irresponsible person and needs to stop being careless. I don't have a toddler. I don't live with anybody, But I still put my coffee and laptop half a kilometer away from each other. You'd think she'd know to put your laptop somewhere away from the kid as well. Being a teen mother is hard, and so is being a student. Carelessness has consequences. You need that laptop. At the start of my last month of pregnancy, against my better judgment, I agreed to let sister-in-law stay with us for free while she attended college nearby. She was 25. She didn't help around the house at all. She would cook a meal and leave the mess behind her. I wasn't doing much cleaning myself, large bump. So perhaps she thought that's how we left things all the time. In the end, after I came down one morning to see the kitchen left a mess after her making her lunch, I had enough and put up a chore list for her. She didn't go out of her way to do them, so I would hand her the hoover or mop and made her clean up after herself. So obviously after this, she wasn't too impressed with me, and I wasn't too impressed with her. She was finished with college on my due date, so was moving out then, and wasn't due back until 3 months later. I told my husband I didn't really think I wanted her back, as I would have a baby to deal with then too. And I needed the spare room so my family could visit. They live a few hours away. On my due date, she left, but also left behind her sheets for me to wash. She didn't dress the bed again even though she knew my mother would be staying as soon as the baby came, so I had to do that. I ended up going a week overdue and had him early in the morning. The next afternoon, his parents came to visit us in the hospital. They stayed in our house that night so they could see him the next day too. I was due to be released from the hospital at 2, and no visitors were allowed before then. My parents were also coming up that day, and my father would be returning home the same day, 6-hour round trip for him. My mother was going to stay a few days to help us. In the end, my son was sick, so the hospital release was delayed by around 2 hours. My father had commitments at home, so unfortunately he had to drive down again before we got home, but he would be back in a few days to meet him. His parents decided they also couldn't wait and drove home too, an hour away. The day my father came to visit again, my sister-in-law also called out to meet the baby. He was chatting to her for a while when I was up dealing with the baby, and when she left, he said, "I didn't realize sister-in-law was moving in with you again in 2 weeks." Neither did I. And here's where the problem began. She had never mentioned that she was back so soon in college. As far as I knew, she was back in 3 months. I was learning to breastfeed and deal with a newborn. No way I wanted a lazy guest there too. So I messaged my husband and asked did he know she planned on staying. It was the first he'd heard of it too. So he texted her and said sorry for the confusion, but wife is just getting used to baby and breastfeeding and can't have someone staying right now. She messaged back, "Okay, no problem. I'll sort something else," and that was the last we heard from her about it. A few days later, the day she went to visit her parents, my husband got a phone call from his dad. How dare we kick sister-in-law out of our house? He said he had nothing against husband or the baby, but I was a B, and they would be having nothing to do with any of us ever again. Not only that, but I had intentionally delayed coming home with our son from the hospital just to interfere with their plans for that day. I insulted sister-in-law by asking her to wash her hands before holding the newborn, and I have always been rude and made them feel uncomfortable visiting our home. So, as you can imagine, this caused some arguments between myself and my husband. He wanted me to apologize at first. No way that was happening. He asked his sister did she know they weren't speaking to us. She just said she didn't think they would react like this, and they would calm down soon. She didn't care as long as someone gave her a free place to stay. Father-in-law paid for her hotel. My husband didn't try to contact them. After about 6 weeks, he said if this is how they are going to behave, then why would he have them in his life? And unfortunately, this was the week his mother decided to break the silence. She messaged, "Can we see the baby?" And that was it. All was forgiven apparently. 2 weeks after this, they came to our house to see the baby. I have never been so angry at having to do something in my life. I couldn't stay in the room when he let them hold the baby. I since learned from brother-in-law that during this time, he was told other things I had apparently done, such as saying I wouldn't give baby my husband's surname. I have kept my maiden name after marriage. The only time I ever mentioned this was as a joke to sister-in-law and my husband, so it obviously came from her. My brother-in-law tried to tell me, what's the worst that can happen from allowing baby to have his grandmother when I suggested she should have no contact with our son? Crazy coming from him since he has no contact with her. I had thought sister-in-law was nice until this happened. I have no time for any of them now. Mother-in-law is currently doing a bit of the silent treatment with my husband at the moment, probably waiting for something to happen again so she can get father-in-law to do the same. Her main aim is to stop father-in-law and my husband from speaking. Anyway, that is a story of how my in-laws ruined my first 2 months with my son. I will never forgive them for it. Sounds like sister-in-law's the golden child and has her parents convinced that you are all dirt. In-law parents cater to her every need and hence enable her behavior and do whatever she asks. She sounds like a real piece of work. Also, bet me if my mother-in-law would make demands in my own home. Can't treat me like a human being? Don't bother coming around, because you're not going to have access to my child. Put your foot down. You and your husband have a child to protect and take care of now. So while I understand that this is your husband's normal, because that's his family, this cannot be your child's normal. What kind of an adult disowns their child because of some imagined slights? A not very mature adult who says disown, but actually means, come beg for my forgiveness and rug sweep the crap out of everything I just did to you, okay? And that makes them crappy parents, and even worse, grandparents. I suggest that you talk to your husband about him getting into therapy to deal with the crappy guilt buttons his parents installed in him during his childhood. Neither one of you owe those people anything, and certainly not access to your child. You are adults and are parents now, and you don't have to see anyone or do anything that your in-laws demand, especially if they are behaving like petulant children. Start laying boundaries now. Think of it as practice for when your own child hits their terrible twos. My 32 female. Dad passed away when I was a wee baby. He was in a car accident with his pregnant female subordinate, who was also his longtime mistress. She did survive the crash, but lost the baby and ended up in an almost vegetative state. She's still alive. My parents had me after 8 years of marriage after dealing with years of infertility. My dad was rich. He came from old money, and while married to my mother, created his own fortune. My mom came from humble beginnings. They had an arranged marriage. While they were married, my dad was in charge of the finances, and when he died, everything went to my mom. She married my dad's younger brother a few years later and had my siblings. They are still happily married. We had a very happy childhood, and my grandparents, Dad's parents who have since passed, were very involved. I had an extremely privileged upbringing. Now, here's where I might be the a-hole. A girl claiming to be my half-sister, my dad's mistress's daughter, has contacted me saying that her mom is on her last legs and that she's trying to get some money for the hospital bills. She is 2 years older than me and claims that she's my dad's daughter and is entitled to my family's money. I have refused to take a DNA test. She has now threatened to take me to court. I refuse to meet her or discuss the issue. Her family is now harassing me, and they tell me that I'm trying to steal her money and that she's my dad's firstborn child. When I told my mom about this, she told me to ignore her and go on with my life. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole, but I disagree with your mom. Contact a lawyer rather than ignore it. If the family is harassing you, this is more than a casual scam. Not the a-hole. Since everything went to your father's next of kin, aka your mother, she's not entitled to anything. However, I would get a lawyer ASAP to see what your options are and to head off any further legal problems. I'm sorry to her for her mother putting her in this situation. She didn't ask to be possibly born out of an affair, but you have no responsibility to her. To be fair, it is just as likely your father is not her father at all, and that's just what her mother and grandparents told her. And if when you actually get any official court documents from this girl, then contact a lawyer. Meantime, you and your family don't owe any DNA to anyone. If anything, her beef is with your mother who inherited your father's estate. It has literally nothing to do with you. Not the a-hole,